Congressman Vern Buchanan is going for his fifth term. His first race could not have been much closer. The Democrats at Washington targeted Buchanan a number of times since, but not at least not yet now. Back in February, we had the chance to talk to Steny Hoyer, the Democratic whip in Congress, about this very issue. Are you concerned that the Democrats are targeting some congressional seats here in Florida, but not others? They don't appear to be targeting Congressman Buchanan here in Sarasota. If you were going to change the dynamic in Congress, don't you have to challenge in more seats?
You've got to target seats where you have good candidates, an ability to raise significant sums of money, and you have good polling numbers. So what we do on the national scale, there are about 65 seats, and we have about 61 really good candidates, we think, around the country, targeted in those seats that we think are doable in the context of having a good candidate, ability to raise good money, good message, and good poll numbers. And right now, this district does not fall in that category because we don't have a candidate who's generating the kind of interest that would allow all three of those to happen.
Joining us to talk about this is Susan Nylon, the host of the Nylon Report. She is also covering politics for the Associated Press this election season. ABC 7 political contributor Frank Alcock. He teaches political science at New College of Florida. And Frank Patty of the Sarasota County Republican Party. And thank you all for joining us. So is the situation that Vern Buchanan is doing such a great job that the Democrats really don't want to jump into this, or that the Democrats have not found the right candidate? Because, as I asked Mr. Hoyer, Christine Jennings became very close to winning this seat. And our friend Keith Fitzgerald ran a race that the Democrats targeted that seat. You know, the Democrats wanted to target it in 2014, but not this time around. Why?
Oh, well, that's actually easy to answer. The first time was an open seat process where there was a pretty nasty primary on the Republican side. Yeah, that was originally. When Fitzgerald ran, it was sort of the height of the ethics investigations, and it was a general election, and he was the strongest candidate in the area in terms of coming off the bench. But the basic fundamentals of this district are it's a fairly safe Republican congressional district. On top of that, you have a candidate that is extremely wealthy, so you're lifting the bar above normal. So you have, again, it slants Republican. You're going to have to raise an enormous amount of money to be competitive. Those two things affect each other. And then, regardless of what you think about Vern Buchanan's positions as a congressman, in an era of increasing hostility in politics, his public image actually, he's managed it fairly well. You cannot accuse Vern Buchanan of being hostile. And I think those things make it extremely difficult, and it's hard to,
I would add also, though, that name recognition is really key. And for Keith Fitzgerald to come right out of a House race and many years at the State House, that's a little bit different than somebody coming out from essentially obscurity and not having that, and then not having all the money that Mr. Buchanan has on top of it. When the DCCC tries to figure out what races they're going to target, they're not just looking at our area, they're looking at the whole state, the whole country, and it's where their money is better spent.
Right, but there is a unique situation right now. Hold on just a second, Frank, because I want to put this to you as well, that whether the Republican nominee for president is Donald Trump or Ted Cruz, there is concern about the impact that it will have on down-ballot races across the country, including here in Florida. And even people like Vern Buchanan, because I had a discussion with him about him, are actually concerned about that. So if ever there was a time, wouldn't it be now?
Yeah, well, truthfully, yeah, we're all concerned about that. If a candidate's that weak, they can bring down the Senate and not kill off the whole majority, but give us a small majority. But Vern, you have to remember, number one, he's done a lot of work for veterans. I personally sent veterans to him, and he gets right on it right away. They had problems with the VA. And the National Cemetery for Veterans, he's worked on that. For the elderly, he's worked very hard on Medicare. He had more than a dozen last year. He had more than a dozen town hall meetings and constantly out with the emails saying, what's your opinion? So he's very attuned to the basically what does people
He's
want.
very good at voter outreach,
Yeah,
no doubt.
very good at that.
Frank, what impact does the congressional redistricting have here? Because this seat, as Ray reported, is sliding farther to the north. In fact, 30% of this district is now Hillsborough County.
Yeah, no, this is going to be interesting, not necessarily in this cycle, but over time. And eventually there's going to be a successor to Vern Buchanan, and that's where it's going to get increasingly interesting. You're trading off the bottom third, you know, 1/3 of Vern Buchanan's district, which is staunchly conservative and pretty stable, for an area that might be a point or two better for Democrats, but it's an area that's growing. Demographically, there's some wealthy communities coming in, but there's a lot of blue-collar communities coming in. I think a nice analog might be Northport, and you see Northport in certain elections actually work pretty well for Democrats. So going forward, you have an area that's the population is growing pretty rapidly. That bottom third east portion of Hillsborough, it could become more competitive for Democrats, you know, 5 years from now, a couple of cycles from now.
Therefore, is the key for Democrats that you have to raise that kind of money, because if you're raising just a couple of $100,000 in going up against Vern Buchanan, really it is. You don't want to say it's a fool's mission, but it's the odds are quite long.
Here's the difference. When you start off with a lot of money like Vern has, you don't have to spend every single day on the phone stumping for donations. You can actually be out politicking. But for a Democrat who doesn't have a large financial base, you'll agree that they spend countless hours on the phone every day instead of out shaking hands. And that itself is a challenge.
And donors, you know, they look at these things just like we look at these things. And so it's not necessarily that they like a candidate or think that they're potentially a strong candidate. If they think it's not winnable, they're going to invest their money where they think they're going to get their return. So there's this vicious cycle in terms of if it looks unwinnable, then it becomes very difficult for even a good candidate to raise the money to make themselves more viable.
There's one point there also now. A lot of candidates, and we've been in the Newtown area too. We've gone down many a time to help out down there. And basically candidates show up down in these places and they're out there during the election. Then they disappear. Vern doesn't. You invite Vern for the clubs and all because the clubs are the workers. No matter how you look at it, that's your ground game, are the clubs. You invite him to a picnic, Vern is there. Invite him to a club, Vern is there. He has questions, the town hall meetings, he's there. So he keeps that in front of the voters constantly. It isn't only just at the election time, but he knows enough that these are the people that are going to vote. These are the people who are going to work for him, and he stays in front of them.
How much do voters take into consideration the tenure in office and the fact that Vern has been there for quite a few years now, and he
has
is
a lot of power.
Right. But in reality, especially in this combustible electorate that we're dealing with right now, do people care about that?
Oh, I think so. I think in a local level they care about it because if they have the ear of their congressman who then can go up and have the ear of somebody else, a lot gets passed. I mean, they take stock in the fact that there's the length of time that he's been in there, because in the grand scheme of things, it really is impacting what's happening here in Sarasota.
And we just have a couple of seconds left, but again, in this combustible election season that we're dealing with right now, would you be shocked or surprised if what we think is north and south changes very quickly?
Yeah, no, I think all bets are off. This has just been the most bizarre election cycle that I've ever seen. And one of the things that we should say is we do have 2 Democratic candidates announced for Vern Buchanan's seat. So it's not as if but the fundraising is a big part of that. And so we haven't really seen fundraising reports. But yeah, no, anything could happen. Absolutely anything could happen.
All right, Frank and Susan, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you all for joining us.